and uncomfortable fashion. I mulled over removing it before eventually conceding, and pulling it over my head. As I removed my shirt, thankful that I'd left my undershirt on after I'd awoken, and dressed hastily for school, I plotted various methods of revenge against the electric mixer responsible for my predicament. They really need to put a warning on that motherfucker.
You look like a dumbass.
Jasper laughed, dodging the shirt I chucked at his head.
I can't believe you're wearing a wife beater. I was right about you going all trailer park on me,
he continued, apparently amused with himself as I ignored the 100th Springer reference of the week. Secretly embarrassed, I considered explaining that I like sleeping in it with Bella having lust between us in a very non-sexual way. I decided that he'd never understand that, and rolled my eyes as I carried on. He watched me as I began measuring the sugar, furrowing my brows in deep concentration. Disturbing my total focus, he asked,
"Why won't you let me help? Again? I've baked a cake before."
I unwaveringly dumped the sugar into the sifter. "Because it's one of those things that's more special when I do it myself," I huffed, and pondered trying my luck at cracking another egg. I'd already destroyed an even dozen. He shook his head and inspected the bottle of liqueur.
"I don't know if Bella will agree. In fact," he sighed, and met my gaze, stoic and grim. "I think, once she sees her kitchen, she'll probably use all that judo shit to beat you down."
The serious expression on his face was both amusing and worrying. I mean, she'd make an exception for me at least, this was what I kept telling myself as I licked my lips and tried to crack another egg. 2 hours, 6 eggs, 1 argument with Jess that he couldn't get drunk off the cherry liqueur, and 2 broken mixers later, I was icing the ugliest fucking cake I'd ever fucking seen. Carlisle had come in once to see what all the laughing was about. The horrified expression on his face had frightened me.
"She'll either find this endearing or appalling,"
he'd said, before adding,
"Are you asking her today?"
Annoyed, I nodded, and watched him exit, casting a nervous glance at the mess covering the counters. "Why," I tilted my head, morose as I spread the icing over the cake. "Why is the cake all fucking crumbling like that? That's not right, is it?" I asked, pursing my lips in deliberation. I suppose making the chocolate curls was a little fucking pointless. Jazz watched the knife with a sinister smile.
"Dude, I think you're supposed to wait for it to cool before you ice it."
I narrowed my eyes at the inconvenient timing of this information. Before the distant sound of the front door closing startled me, I looked to him with frantic eyes, but it was too late. Bella and Alice came striding toward the kitchen, Eliza's face excited and flush and Bella snorting in laughter. Jess jumped down from the counter, both of us frenzied, as we stood in the middle of the obliterated kitchen, me covered in sticky batter, and him looking suspiciously guilty, as he swiftly hid the bottle of liqueur he held behind his back.
"Did you see her pan?"
Bella came to an abrupt halt, eyes wide, as they surveyed the kitchen, aghast. "Shit," I inwardly groaned. Jess's smile grew vindictive, as he stepped away from me.
"It was all Edward,"
he blurted, his finger pointing to my anxious face. I narrowed my eyes as he mouthed, "Payback is a bitch," and sidled up to Alice. He shrugged indifferently, as he slung his arms over her shoulders.
"I tried to help."
"Prick." Manning up, I turned to Bella, and forced a smile. "It's a birthday cake," I explained while sweeping my hand over it in introduction. My teeth ground at Eliza's delicate snort as she gaped at the horrific lump of dark brown. Bella furrowed her brows and darted her eyes back and forth between me and the atrocity of a cake. She wasn't wearing her hoodie, but instead, a tight-fitting shirt that was probably meant to be suitable for her boxing class. Her hair was tied up into a ponytail that hung over her shoulder as she gaped. Thankfully, all teeth appeared to be present and accounted for. Alice chimed to Jasper in bemusement.
"You never made me a cake."
And pouted. His glare at me intensified.
"You baked cake?"
Bella asked, as if trying to make the words fit, and finding it impossible to do so. Swallowing, I nodded, and awaited her judgment as she stared back and forth with a blank expression. Endearing. Appalling. Endearing. Appalling. Her lip twitched once, twice, and then it transformed into a bright, disbelieving grin. Endearingly appalling. It is. I smiled back at her in relief as she slowly wandered to me across the kitchen. Milking this endearing shit for all it was worth, I smiled wider, swatting my yet-to-be-cut hair from my eyes, and informed we might need a new mixer. She stopped at the counter, her smile momentarily wavering as I watched her jaw lock, before she rolled her eyes.
That's okay.
She chuckled and leaned over the cake to inspect it. I met Jazz's incredulous stare and mouthed endearing, mockingly. He clucked his tongue and tugged her disappointed Alice out of the kitchen. Bella was still smiling, and even blushing a little as she dipped her finger into the icing.
You know, I always figured you for the box mix kind of guy.
She mused, popping her finger into her mouth and licking it off. My eyes fixed on the gesture, watching it disappear between her lips. Down, boy. My confused expression must have been apparent, as she rested with her elbows on the counter, and explained.
You know, the pre-made mix is in the box.
And shrugged. There's pre-made box mixes. Grinning sadly, she nodded until her eyes took in my full appearance, widening. I grimaced as I inspected my front, recalling how the second mixer had been even more violent than the first.
You have a little something.
Trailed off, her hand pausing in uncertainty, as she reached for my chin, sweeping her thumb over the skin, and inspecting it blankly. The mixer won the battle, but trust me, I quirked an eyebrow defensively. I won the war. I gestured to the now mangled appliance that lay helplessly beside the trash can and smirked. With a stealing breath, I turned to her, ready to cut to the chase, before she realized that I'd actually destroyed 2 mixers, though, in my defense, the first had been entirely accidental. When I met her gaze, she was staring at me with the same blank expression. Worried and realizing that it'd be just like my girl to have some kind of freakish attachment to electrical appliances, I asked, "What's wrong?" and prayed that I hadn't destroyed one of her favorites or something. She kept blinking and staring before she took a step toward me and replied in an oddly strained voice.
Edward, you're covered in chocolate. In the kitchen, wearing...
Unable to continue, she paused with parted lips, her gaze growing intense in a way that I recognized. It had been almost a week since the kiss on the sofa, but that uncertainty was still there, lingering in the air between us like a cancer. We stole innocent kisses as we passed in the hallway, whenever someone would leave the room, and before we got into bed, but it wasn't really the same. I figured we were probably both scared shitless of just unleashing the full force of our desire. Like last time. It was why I'd wanted to butter her up and finally ask her what Carlisle had been suggesting for days now at an annoying frequency. I couldn't be sure if it was the thought of me cooking, or seeing me covered in chocolate, but she was clearly turned on by it. Her head tilted infinitesimally, eyes focusing on my lips as she worriedly tugged at her ponytail. She mouthed something that I swear looked like filthy before she met my gaze again, dropping her hair. Like teenage hormonal magnets, we were both standing still 1 second and colliding in the next. I eagerly crushed my lips to hers, pulling her waist to me as she fisted her hands into my shirt and pulled me closer. Our lips parted at the same second, boldly pressing our tongues together and darting them in and out of each other's mouths for the first time in months. It was the least graceful kiss I think I'd ever experienced, our teeth and noses knocking as she stumbled back, tugging with her hands and mouth before she hit the counter. She lifted herself without breaking the kiss, now level with my height, and pulling me closer as we both trembled with excitement. I allowed myself 5 seconds to feel her tongue against mine, our breathing erratic and uneven, before I yanked myself away, panting. Too much, I gasped, shaking my head and burying my head into her shoulder. This was really our problem from the beginning. We kept bottling shit up until it erupted into a volatile tangle of tongues and emotion. It made us unpredictable and reckless. Her hand stroked my hair gently as I fought to calm my raging everything, my arms hugging her waist to me tightly. She kissed my neck, a silent apology that really wasn't necessary, as she eventually returned my embrace with a sigh. Finally ready to admit when I needed help handling the delicacy of our situation, I lifted my head. She'd come so far, and had done so well. I was tired of being excluded, but also, I wanted to know how to do it right, how to be with her, and only one person could really tell me. like had been happening frequently. As of late, I began considering her progress in therapy, and once again disliking how I meant to willingly exclude myself from it. Even Carlisle and her were close enough to talk about it, and yet I'd been only bare minimum supportive. It bothered me more than I wanted to admit that I couldn't be good enough to actively encourage her. It was obviously something she took great pride in. I wanted to trust that she wouldn't just move on to the next motherfucker once she was well enough. And maybe, if I could show her that trust, I'd gain hers back again eventually. Meeting her apologetic gaze, I locked my jaw, and uttered the request that had plagued me for days. I want to meet Carmen.